The way that this last election has turned out was really a massive effort to restore the original binary that was at the root of how this country was established. And I took that and I connected it with what I've been realizing in working with white supremacy for the last couple of years, in that what we're seeing right now is the backlash of 50 years of civil rights by people who are angry and who were dragged into the civil rights movement, kicking and screaming, who have now kind of regrouped and recovered from that and are now starting to reestablish that pre-existing binary.
I don't want to be pessimistic, but I want to be realistic. It's one thing to talk about bridging the divide when you can assume goodwill. The question is, what do you do about bridging the divide when fear and hatred are being weaponized to create power for a group or a set of groups that fear the loss of their privilege and the only deal that they've been offered?
They don't have to be a part of those movements to be inspired by those movements. If you've ever been around somebody in a bad mood and found yourself in a bad mood, you kind of understand the dynamic, but on a larger scale.
Right now, we have to ask, how do you actually create cohesion behind the great principles that this country stands for and why immigrant groups have always wanted to come here? Rule of law, separation of powers, free press, equality, just all of the tenets, e pluribus unum, of the many one.
We're trying to understand what is driving people to such depths of anger and hatred, and then ultimately violence. Radicalization in many ways, I believe, comes from unresolved experiences of trauma, whether they're justified or not. How do we know if something's traumatic? Well, if the person feels that it was traumatic, right? And so, many ways, we're talking about a group of people who feel disenfranchised, who are still probably a group of privilege, but don't have full reign of that privilege under civil rights laws, right, and movements. And so they're feeling in some way that they're becoming the victims of civil rights in many ways. And there's that denial and that dissonance built into that narrative. But for us, we need to understand that that's their narrative. We don't have to agree with it. We're not giving away what we believe in, and we're not conceding to anything, but we're also not condemning in that way. And we know that that's an important aspect of the work we do, because in order to have dialogue, you have to have a sense of a shared experience created in the room with the person that you're trying to help. So if that person doesn't feel that you're sharing with them that space, they'll reject anything you have to say or anything that you offer, no matter how great it is. And so we're trying to position ourselves not in the middle, but we're trying to, in many ways, stretch our spirits around these issues so that we can envelop it. Rather than have to choose a side, we're trying to embrace the sides that are out there as a whole and understand that, look, this person is not irredeemable. This person is not broken beyond repair. This person can be reached.
Here's the thing, and I think you bring up some extremely valid points about reaching out, understanding, listening. Let's not conflate everybody who voted in this last election with the 5% maybe who belong to Breitbart and who are white supremacists with a new garb. I looked at the voters, not the exit polls, but the actual voter files of folks who had voted once or twice for President Obama and then switched to Trump. Because they're not necessarily with the white supremacists. They could have never voted for Obama. So my question was, are they globalization refugees? They were so tired of being put through the wood chipper. White folks in this country have lost real income. Working class whites have been rototilled. That's why you see the opioid epidemic. That's hopelessness.
We have to be a receptacle. We have to be, in some ways, in a position to receive people who are lost to hate, because they come out more often than we think. But if we're not there to highlight the exit strategy for these men and women lost in hate, where do they go, right? And so I think it's important for all of us to kind of embrace and adopt this idea that we have to make space for the people that we don't like also. Otherwise, we become a lot like the people that we feel, you know, have done this to us, you know, and it's sad to watch that, but I think we forget where we've come from at times, and we forget how hard we fought to get where we're at, and we get frustrated with others who haven't made it out at the same pace or in the same way we have.
I think what MPAC represents, you represent one of the most important platforms for enacting that vision, putting it on a platform with wheels and then some jet fuel. But folks, this is about power. We can't fight a cultural war with policy and white papers. If we don't get ourselves organized, this constitutional democracy can go very quickly. I think the Muslim American community is going to be the vanguard of solving not just the international crisis over violent extremism, but in this country, I think this community is the key. I think the Muslim American community is going to be the vanguard of solving not just the international crisis over violent extremism, but in this country, I think this community is the key.